Good morning, everybody. Good morning. Awesome. Thank you, everybody, for coming to our employee well-being panel. I'm joined up here by some fabulous panelists that we're going to go through and introduce. My name is Thomas daCunha. I am the moderator. I'm an AVP HR business partner at Liberty Bank, and I also serve as Director of Sponsorship for Human Resources Association of Central Connecticut. That's a mouthful. So I'll hand it over to Cesar for an introduction. If you could share with everybody your name and your title, organization, and what brings you here today. Why are you passionate about employee wellness?
Sure. My name is Cesar Cortes. I'm the owner of Cortes Benefits Consulting and Sumas Financial. My office is based out of Shelton, Connecticut, but I am a state-based organization. I am also registered and licensed in about 15 other states in the country. As a financial planner and as someone who's experienced a lot of hardship growing up, my father passing away, my mother having a business that wasn't successful, going bankrupt, I've kind of developed a passion for helping people succeed. And one of my mottos is I help people live life, living inspired, financially empowered. So it's really about helping individuals find that passion to think about their finances, make or ask the hard questions, and make necessary educated decisions by having that education, that information, which really is about empowering all of us. So thank you for having me here.
Fantastic. Thank you. Andi?
Hard to follow that. I'm Andi Campbell. I'm the president of WellSpark Health. I'm passionate about well-being. I call myself a recovering HR leader. I spent the majority of my career in HR, actually. Only the last 2 years of it been at WellSpark and doing the work I do around health and health coaching and workplace well-being. Just a quick story about why I am passionate about it. Back in 2015, I did a trip to Bali, and it sounds very eat, pray, love. It was not. It didn't end up the same way as the book does, but long story short, I had a few moments of being disconnected from my job and realized, wow, I have a really unhealthy relationship with my career and what that looks like being across the world at a different time, and came back and made a commitment in my role in HR to begin to explore what well-being looks like in terms of the career relationship between individual and their employer, individual and their career, and have since then been doing that work. So thrilled today to be part of this conversation.
Thank you, Andi. Allyson?
Good morning, everyone. I'm Allyson Powell. I am the director of the Employee Assistance Program at UConn Health, which is not such a small business, right? But I will say that in addition to the work we do with UConn, we provide assessment, brief counseling, and referral services to our faculty and staff, our medical residents and fellows, but we also provide services to 30 other organizations in Connecticut, including some smaller agencies and smaller businesses. So I am thrilled to be here. My interest in well-being and wellness really stems from my career as a social worker and a mental health professional, and really having a seat at the table oftentimes to see how important that is in the business world in terms of staff retention and just taking care of your most valuable investment, which is your folks, your people.
Awesome. Thank you very much. So just so we're all on the same page here, Allyson, I'm going to kick the first question off to you, and then as you folks feel, jump in. Just so everyone's on the same page, what is employee well-being and why is it so important?
So really, there's a really easy way to define, I think, employee well-being to me, which is the state of being at your best in terms of your functioning, not just obviously at work, but also at home. So, you hear terms like being the best version of yourself, which is a way to think about it, but someone who is really sort of in a place where they're able to manage things like stress, because that's a part of our life, right, every single day. And when I think about it in the workplace, I think about things like job satisfaction, we think about engagement of our employees, and we also should be making sure that we are balancing what we do at work with, time with our families, time with our friends, and also really time for ourselves. Are we able to fit in the things that are good for us, how we care for ourselves? When I think about that, things like how we're eating, are we exercising, are we taking time out to do some things, besides work and worrying about like the bottom line of our businesses. So
awesome. Thank you. Anybody else want to opine on that?
The only thing I'll add is I think there's a move from wellness to well-being now. Maybe you are starting to hear people talk about well-being so much more than we're saying corporate wellness or employee wellness. I think that's indicative of where things are going in trends, and I know we'll talk about that in a bit. But I just want to point that out, that we're talking about well-being as an individual. I think there's well-being as an organization, there's well-being as a small business. So I think it's all tied up together. But wellness and well-being are sometimes synonymous, but I think this move toward well-being is indicative of where the market is going in relationship to the space.
And just to add to that, as a business owner, some of us sometimes we think of ourselves as owners and don't realize that we ourselves are employees of our own. And I live by the law of attraction. Your employees kind of live and work the way they see you live and work. And if any of us have been to a situation where you wake up in the morning and something bad happens and all of a sudden you can't focus on the job, right? You can't do things, you can't function properly. As a business owner, same thing as an employee. So when I help clients develop their business, develop strategies and platforms, we really look about what kind of person do you want to be? What kind of person would you want to project forward so that your employees can be the same, so that you provide an environment somewhere where they have the financial education, they have wellness programs to help their well-being. Like Prudential, for example, we just found out they have a program where families suffering through a spouse through cancer can call a consulting company free and they can have that conversation. Think about that. My wife had cancer 8 years ago. God bless, she's good now. But I remember myself going through that and saying, how am I going to go wake up in the morning and go to work and make $1? My wife is struggling at home and I've got all these bills, and it just overwhelms you. So yes, well-being, especially at your home, how you bring that to the workplace. So providing an environment as an owner to allow employees to feel like they're supported, like they have all the necessary assistance to help them in their personal lives, makes that company a lot more productive, absolutely, and efficient.
I completely agree with that, and I would just like to also add, I think after the pandemic, and I use this term all the time, I mean, there are some silver linings that came from that. I think what I'm seeing in my work is employees are better able to identify what they need. And they're not uncomfortable talking about what they need. They're not uncomfortable or as uncomfortable talking about mental health or emotional well-being. They're able to identify when they feel stress or if they need things from their workplaces. So I think that to be competitive today, when we think about our branding, remember your employees are advertisement for you. So happy employees, employees that are in a state of well-being are really a great advertisement for you. They're talking about where they work. They're talking about what's great about where they are. And I hear stories often from organizations that are doing really great work. So I think it's important to remember that it really does benefit you as an organization to take care of your staff and take care of yourselves.
Absolutely. And one of the points that was made earlier was that your greatest investment, your greatest asset is your employees. And, there's a saying that a business owner who stops investing in their employees to save money is like a man who stops a clock to save time. It doesn't work. And if you have employees who don't feel that they're being taken care of and don't have the resources that they need, they're going to look elsewhere. And one of the things, right, that has happened over the last several years is the Great Resignation. I'm sure some of you in this room have experienced that with some of your staff leaving, right? The whole world of remote work. You're no longer bound by geographical guidelines, et cetera, et cetera. And you're trying to get someone to come into your retail establishment or come into your office or come to, provide a service to your customers when they're saying, well, I could go work from my PJs in my bedroom for XYZ Corporation, so why am I going to wake up, get ready, and come to work for you on site, right? So now you have some of those challenges that you need to overcome as well. So it's really important to make sure that your employees feel that they're being taken care of. So Cesar, from a health and wellness program perspective, how do they play into the success of our businesses? Why is it so important?
Okay. 3 points. Number 1 is going to be about rising or increasing productivity and efficiency. Number 2, competitive hiring. And number 3, retention. So when it comes to production, based on the conversation we had, having an employee that comes in, focus on the job, not concerned so much about my everyday bills and so on. Can I afford my mortgage this month? Because the owners provided a competitive compensation package, which includes not only just salary or income, also benefits comes into play. Number 2, competitive hiring, because if you said the Great Resignation, 58% of those surveyed workers basically stated that one of the main reasons for them to look for other jobs other than environment and comfort was, number 1, was compensation. So again, part of your hiring process is putting together a proper package. And then number 3, retention. A happy employee doesn't look elsewhere, right? It's just kind of like, at the end of the day, if I'm happy with I love what I do, I have a passion for what I do. So I try to build an environment for my employees also to come in and love what they do. One of the small things I do is I don't work in my office from 8, 10, 6, 9 to 5. They have responsibilities. Some come in at 10 o'clock in the morning, leave at 3 as long as the work is done. Tomorrow I give them that freedom and control to be their own business owners. As a financial advisor, we want to give them that flexibility, that time for them to get creative and learn a little bit about themselves so they can help others do the same. So I'm trying myself as a business owner to create that environment so I can hire competitively, retain the employees I currently have, and of course be more efficient and effective as my employees are thinking about the job and not more about what's happening at home.
Yeah, and piggybacking off of that with when you have someone who leaves, and if you don't have that bench strength internally, and now you have to source someone externally, you have lost productivity, you have the time that you're spending trying to recruit that new individual, the interview time, then once you bring them on board, you have the ramp-up time. All of that adds up, and the Society for Human Resources Management, SHRM, did a study on this, and the cost of turnover is, on average, about 2 times the annual salary for a position. And you might think, wow, 2 times, that can't be true. What if you have someone who's, a highly compensated person, they're making $100,000? Well, you're likely looking for a greater niche or a particular skill, and you might have a larger ramp-up time. You might be trying to make sure you have the right fit. So there's challenges and there's expenses that come along with that. So you can really overcome that by making sure you have that engaged workforce that isn't looking to leave. Would either of you like to add anything?
The only thing that I would say is, in addition to those metrics that you're talking about in terms of measuring sort of how happy your employees are, right? It's important to make sure that any new hires coming on board understand where you stand in terms of well-being. I think about an initiative that we did at UConn this year, which was with our incoming medical residents, and we did one-on-one meetings with each of them just to introduce them to resources that are available. And again, it's a resource-rich organization for sure, but the biggest message that we wanted to relay to these folks was, it's important to us that you take care of yourselves. If you need time off, don't be afraid to ask. You don't have to tell us why. Appointments for counseling or to see a dentist or whatever you need for you, we want you to do that. So I think it's important that we make sure that our staff see that, that reflected in, how we position ourselves, what our work culture looks like. We've all worked for places that, you're afraid to ask, or you've got to work until 6 or 7 at night to demonstrate your commitment to the organization. And I don't think that's necessarily the way it's going to be going forward. I think we really do need to take a look at how we're balancing our lives, because we're going to burn ourselves out if we don't.
Yeah, I can add 2 things. I think there's a reality to the cost of there's the cost of unhealthy employees, and particularly as obviously for a larger business it's more significant, but even for small businesses there's the cost of care going up, and that might show up in inflated renewals and other such things. So there's just like a real cost of an unhealthy employee. And I'll add to something Allyson just said, which is life happens during work hours, and there's a reality to that these days particularly. So I think there's a cost to that as well when we don't create space for what people need every day. There's inevitably going to be an issue, either productivity or cost of health or turnover or any of these other things.
And making sure your employees feel like they can take care of life when it happens, even if it happens during work, allowing them that flexibility. Even though you might have a short-term productivity loss, you're going to reap that benefit in the longer term. So thank you. So Andi, what are some trends, you touched on trends earlier, what are some trends that we're currently seeing in terms of employee well-being?
Yeah, if you'll indulge me, I'll use a story to get this conversation going, because I think it really brings to life some of the things that we're talking about. So I mentioned I'm a recovering HR leader. I used to lead HR for a large organization of 15,000 employees. So obviously not small business, much larger business, but interesting dynamics. And many of you may have experienced this even in a small organization, where I had an employee who had been late over and over again to work, over and over again. And it ended up escalating to me eventually. And the HR business partner wanted to let the employee go. And the employee had been with us for like over 20 years. And so I knew our CEO was going to be really invested in understanding why we were letting somebody go who had been with him for a really long time. So he said, let me at her, let me find out what's going on. And of course, as every good HR person, I sat down with him because I wouldn't let him be alone with her. And we sat together side by side, and the employee was over there, and I was sort of on the sidelines watching this unfold. And he leaned in and he said, what's going on with you? What's happening? This just doesn't feel right. And I can't believe we've gotten to a point where we're going to let you go. And she starts sobbing. And she says, a few months ago, you changed our health plan. And as a result, I couldn't afford my depression medication anymore. And so I haven't been taking it, and I can't get up in the morning. And I think when I think about trends in the workplace, those are the types of subjects that used to be taboo, things we don't talk about, and now have become very prevalent and forward, and almost front-facing and forward. Now we're talking about mental health beyond just depression and anxiety medication. We're talking about substance abuse openly. We're talking about resilience and overwhelm and burnout. These are places where I think wellness has become well-being. Wellness used to be, go do your step challenge, and then we'll give you a water bottle at the end. We fondly refer to it as water bottle wellness. Kara's laughing. But we do fondly refer to it as the water bottle wellness. And I think we're moving in this direction, trending toward, mental health. We're trending toward integrating the competencies of well-being into our leadership development work. We're moving toward creating cultures of well-being where organizations are thinking, what else is happening? What are my people's strategies? Retention, talent development, where does well-being play a part in that? That's where we're going. And I think more and more small and larger businesses are saying, if we don't look at wellness differently, we have to do that, or else we're going to end up not competing for the best talent anymore, because talent now expects it to be different. As Allyson mentioned, it's a real basic supply and demand. If you think about it, pre-pandemic, there was a lot of talent all over the place. Now we're in this place where talent is expecting something different. If we don't kind of change the way that we do business, more flexibility, different kinds of benefits, different kinds of options, it's going to completely make it difficult for you to compete to get the best talent.
And I want to add one little thing to kind of piggyback on that. And I don't know if anyone was in the marketing panel right before this, but a key component here is know your audience, right? And your employees, when we talk about employee wellness and well-being, your employees are your audience. And the workforce, while yes, we have boomers who are aging, we also have millennials and Gen Zs that are entering the workforce, that are in the workforce now. When I see some of the dates of birth of some of our new hires, I cringe. But
it's frightening.
The workforce is getting younger. And younger people are starting families. And another topic that used to be taboo is infertility. And a large number of medical plans don't include fertility treatments. And there's a huge expense associated with that can come out of folks' pockets, that then they're having to deal with the financial burden of that. And it also can take a huge mental toll on a young couple who are trying to start a family, and they're having challenges with that. So right. I would encourage you all to go back and work with your brokers and work with your health plans to see if there's an option to add that coverage if you don't currently offer it. That's just my one little
And if
plug.
I may too, to add to what Thomas is saying, I think on the flip side of that, understanding your data, period, because as much as I'm sure I'm going to make every man in this room uncomfortable, so now Oprah's talking perimenopause and menopause, right? That's a new subject that was never in the workplace. And now it's become highly prevalent. I think some of us women are very happy to start seeing the conversations happening, but it is a real thing that's happening for women. So I think what point you're making is so important. It's understanding your data. What is your employee, what is happening around you? What's the market look like? What kind of talent are you trying to attract, and what are you solving for? And then identifying that and then putting in place programs. So whether it's attracting the younger employee or serving somebody who's aging or trying to age gracefully, as I like to call it, whatever that looks like.
Absolutely. Anything else before
Yeah,
I
I
move
think
on?
one of the things I've seen lately is the increase in perceived benefits versus real benefits. As small business owners, we've got budgets. Things are getting more expensive. Health insurance provided directly as a small business owner sometimes unaffordable, and it's a huge tool in order for hiring. So I've seen lately a lot of what's called perceived benefits, which is large organizations, small businesses providing access to services, family counseling, corporate education, where advisors like myself would come in on a quarterly basis and talk about budgeting one day. One day is savings, one day is retirement, and one day is life planning, for example, right? The three things that can happen: death, disability, and longevity. So a lot of those consulting services, a lot of those platforms are available really at minimal cost. And those are benefits that you can add to support that environment, that culture, that employee that's seeking assistance and either don't know who to talk to, don't have the proper group within the employee staff to talk to, right? So as then they're talking about it, but as owners, can we provide a step further, right? Not only just allow that environment the job, but provide an access to a specialist, a professional, whether in staff or someone you can hire as a perceived benefit, to allow them to have that conversation with other people and professionals to help them.
That's awesome. Thank you. And this is actually a great segue when we talk about knowing our audience, knowing our data, and kind of when we start to talk about, and we're going to talk about in a few minutes, what employees are looking for. But Allyson, can you help us understand how can business owners gauge the well-being of their workforce so that they can start to know some of this data?
So we've talked about this a little bit. Cesar, you talked about metrics like productivity and those sorts of things, which obviously as business owners, those are things you're looking for, right? You're looking for sort of the bottom line and what you're getting for the cost of your workforce. But I think the easiest way to really gauge the well-being of your group is ask them. Do a survey. Do an annual or a semi-annual well-being or satisfaction survey. Go back to your folks and ask them how they're doing, because they will tell you. And I know in smaller groups, some of the anonymity that we ideally want to see in a survey so that you get a good participation rate might be a little trickier. But if you can do a survey that's anonymous, try to do so. But be transparent about the results of that. So sometimes we don't like what we get back. It's important that we listen, though, and that we go back to folks and we view this as an opportunity or a starting point to try and see how we move forward in terms of what are our folks experiencing in terms of stress at work. That's the number one presenting concern that I hear, and stress is certainly not something that we can eliminate. Part of our success often is due to stress. There is a type of stress called eustress that is actually good. It's how most of us did well in school, as we worried about doing well on an exam, or if you have a big presentation coming up, you're working hard and you're feeling that stress. So we can't eliminate it, but we want to take the pulse of our workforce if we can. And it doesn't have to even be a large, a labor-intensive survey. It can really be what we sometimes call pulse surveys. So maybe you just send out a quick question to your staff and say, how was your stress level this last month while we were working on this project? Or did this initiative that we put in place help stress? And just see what people are telling you. You can certainly also recruit volunteers to do little focus groups or to interview, to talk about what they need. So those are, I mean, really going back and asking is, I think, the best approach in terms of gauging how people are doing. They will tell you. A satisfaction survey is going to ask questions about stress, about burnout, about how engaged they feel in the organization, whether or not they feel heard. That's another thing that I think we're hearing a lot about, particularly from employees that might be working remotely. You know, it's tougher for them to participate sometimes or to feel like they're heard. So are we demonstrating to our staff that, yes, we hear you, that you are a valuable part of the team, and making sure that they're engaged in the conversation. So.
Awesome, thank you. And I think a critical point that you touched on is when you ask and you solicit this feedback, make sure you listen and then take actions and be transparent in your communication to your employees. Hey, you asked, we listened, we're implementing this new change based on the feedback that you gave. And that's going to help drive that needle. You know, I used to work for an organization, and every year we did an engagement survey and did nothing with the data. And every year when the survey results came back, we're like, why isn't it moving? Well, because we weren't doing anything about the feedback we were getting. So I think that's a critical point.
I would also just add some open-ended questions to the surveys. I mean, I've also seen surveys that, you know, are very difficult to really get your point across when they have, you know, finite, you know, yes or no questions. Really add some open-ended questions as well to get feedback, honest feedback.
Because then you get, the open-ended will really get the ball rolling, and you might get some out-of-the-box thinking. And this is actually a good segue into our next question, Cesar, that I'll kick over to you, is what are some key benefits for which employees are looking these days, right? The workforce looks different than it may have 10, 15, 20 years ago. What are employees looking for?
Well, the workforce has changed, but it still comes down to the basic human necessity, right? It comes down to we all want to be healthy, so health. And we all want to have wealth, right? We want to have that financial freedom. So at the end of the day, and even though that's simple in its way, nowadays with advancement in technology and different companies coming in, it's really about offering voluntary or involuntary benefits or a perceived benefit versus a real. I'll give you a couple of examples here. So for health insurance, for example, small business owners understand premiums aren't as cost effective as you would want them to be. Because again, it is what it is, it's expensive, but there's a perceived way of offering health insurance. One of those examples is an HRA, health reimbursement account. For those of you who don't know or have never heard of ICHRA, which is an individual coverage health reimbursement account, basically as a business owner, you want to provide health insurance for your employees. But you don't have the finances in your budget to provide a contribution for these expensive premiums, 50, 60%, and it's tough to compete with Access Health on the individual market when most people qualify for tax credits. So as a business owner, one of the things you can do is you can set up an ICHRA. You can basically tell them to go to Access Health, provide and accept the coverage with their eligibility, and as a business owner, you can then come back and reimburse them a portion of their premium. So you are offering assistance as a health benefit without directly being involved with choosing what health insurance to offer them. As you know, employees sometimes have doctors that take Anthem, don't take Connecticut, vice versa. Here's another way of having to avoid those issues, right? So you are indirectly offering a health benefit. Another example is we have here MyCT Savings. Again, as a business owner, you want to offer a 401k. Costs may be ineffective for you. So one of the things you can do is have them the access, give them the access to MyCT Savings, enroll them, but then bring in a financial advisor, someone to come in on the educational side to help them and advise them on basic finances, how much to contribute into MyCT Savings, what kind of portfolios they should be having. Because again, MyCT Savings is a great resource, but if your employees don't know about investments and don't have the education, it's kind of like a null point. So I think that really today, it's really about a business owner being creative, understanding their budget, obviously, looking at that growth of that specific budget over the next years, and start small. Start implementing little things like get them on MyCT Savings, get them started. Bring in an advisor who, literally like me, I cost nothing to come in and have a conversation with your employees about financial wellness. We actually bring in also, like a friend of mine, Noel, doctor, he comes in, and in DCF, he was actually doing twice a month massages. Not lying. The company realized, I did a survey, and they realized that the stress level at DCF 3 years ago was at an all-time high in Stratford, Bridgeport, New Haven, Waterbury, and certain urban cities. So one of the things they did was, one of the ways to relieve that stress is, why not bring in someone to literally provide massages? And they provide them at a discounted price. The city didn't pay for anything. They just allowed them an access to someone to come in, promote their services, and literally provide massages. Now, if anyone's had a massage, you know the effect that that does on you once you come out. It's just you kind of let yourself go. And that's really, I think, one of those things about benefits is being creative. Don't look at your competitor and say, they're offering a 401k and they're matching. That may not be who you are. Two most important letters in the word business, which are, anyone? Be you, right? So as a small business owner, people buy you. They don't buy the products, they don't buy your services, they buy you. And as employees, they also buy you. So again, about projecting who you are as a person helps to create that environment and allows them to ferment their lives and kind of take care of their personal lives at the same time as build wealth and take care of their health. So that's my go-to.
Thank you very much, and that's a great segue. And Andi, I'll kick it over to you, right? We're all small business owners. We're all busy. We're all strapped. We're all stressed. What are some simple solutions that we can implement to help drive the needle on this?
Yeah, one of the things I would have added, actually, nice segue to where we're going in terms of solutions. One thing I would have added what Cesar said is, yeah, the workforce has changed, but we're all still humans in the workforce. And the number one thing people crave is connection. And how do you create connection? It's similar to what Allyson said. We've got to ask questions. We've got to listen. One of the easiest solutions to implement is a conversation with your employees. It could be as simple as developing your leaders on how to have different kinds of conversations. It could be implementing mental health first aid. That's a simple, easy thing. Mental Health Connecticut offers it for a very low price, something easy that you can put in, and it can teach you or any of the people in your organization how to support each other. Excellent local resource that's very easy to find. The other thing I would say in terms of solutions is we have to step back and think, what am I solving for? What is the one thing that would make a difference? And it might start with asking your employees or thinking about what that is for you, but potentially what am I solving for, and then how can I align a solution to that? If some of the things that Cesar said resonate, great, but maybe you're thinking, I have all of that covered. Well, what else? What else can you do? What are you solving for? Do you want to have your employees feel better about working with you? Do you want them to feel more connected? Do you want to be attracting different talent? What is it that is important to you as a strategy for your business around your people? That's the first question I always, regardless of size of organization, I step back and I say, 1 year from now, how is the behavior different in your organization? And then let's talk about what solutions we would put in place. It could be some simple solutions like you just heard from Cesar, it could be, or from Allyson, but it could be bringing in health coaching. It could be bringing in, like I said, the mental health first aid. The other thing I would say is consider, is there an opportunity to add more flexibility? Is there time off? Is there volunteer time off? Is it a mental health day? Is it Fridays we end at 3 o'clock? Is it no meeting Wednesdays? One thing I've brought into my own organization, I have 70 people that work on my team, and what we've done recently is we've said between 9 a.m. and 2 p.m. on Wednesdays, we don't schedule any meetings. And what that's done is it started to take away the barrier of working late. People were working late every day because they didn't have any daytime to do their actual work. A lot of you are nodding. So simple. Didn't cost me any money. We just said, we're not going to do this anymore. No more are we going to do 5 days, all meetings, without any opportunity to do our work. And so where we can and control things, that's what we've done. So those are some of the things to think about. It isn't just bring in a different benefit. Maybe that's important. But it could be, how do we do business every day differently? What do I expect from my people? What do I expect from my business? And what can I align to that?
Awesome. Thank you very much. Now, how are we on time? Yeah, okay, that's what, okay. Great, so we're going to open it up for some Q&A if anyone has any questions for the panel.
It sounds like a general trend, I can project if I'm not right here, It sounds like a general trend is a little bit of a shift from more of a passive to an active role and involvement with your employees from some of the things I've heard each of you talk about. I'd imagine as an employer, and that's scary, right? We're learning more. We have more information now that we've been given. One, we have to do something with that, but two, does that expose us in any way as employers too? And so how might you help guide an employer in that regard?
I'd be happy to tackle that if you want. Yeah. So it's funny, Kara, bringing this up because this is something that I'll go to HR conferences all over the country and speak about well-being, and it's one of the first questions, regardless of size of organization. So it's, well, what about the liability that goes with this? Because it's always been very taboo to talk about someone's health. What about PHI? What about HIPAA? What about all the things? And there's just a reality to human connection. And so when you can reframe well-being from a place of, I'm here to support, I'm here to help, you don't have to be the person that solves the problem. It's understanding what are the resources. And there are so many resources in the Connecticut community to support you and support your people. It's just educating yourself to know what your resources are and recognizing when someone needs help, where to send them. That will empower you, I think, to take a step back. What people are willing to tell you doesn't put you at risk. Whenever I think about liability, it's what are you digging around in behind the scenes? But if somebody's openly sharing with you, I have depression, like the employee that I mentioned earlier, I'm depressed. Okay, now we're getting somewhere. Now we can tackle this together. I wasn't the person to solve it, but I certainly can sit down and say, what are the resources that are available to help that employee? So I think the more conversations we can have, the more we recognize people are willing to self-select, and I imagine Allyson may have some perspective on this as well, but it's scary when we're digging around behind the scenes. When we're being open and transparent and honest and people are willing to share, the wealth and breadth of community resources in this state is absolutely tremendous. And I'll say, I came from Southern California, so I came from a place where the resources were much different, and I can't say enough about the state of Connecticut and living and working in this state.
I couldn't agree with you more. I would add to that it's the human side of it, like you mentioned. Absolutely. You don't have to have the answers, but I think as business owners, we should be, approachable. I mean, someone should feel safe enough to approach us, or we should be able to say to them, are you okay? Just a simple question, are you okay? Or I'm worried about you. Maybe they've missed more time from work than normal. There's nothing wrong with asking. And you don't have to have the answer. You don't have the answer. You're just demonstrating that you care, that there is help out there, that let me help you, see if I can direct you to the right place. One of the things I would recommend that any small business do, which does not cost a lot of money, is start to develop a list of resources that you can either maintain on a website or just have tucked away in a folder in your office. Because, like Andi said, we have lots of resources in Connecticut. And it may be that you're going to direct them to some clearinghouse to find the right resource, or direct them back to their physician or whoever it is. But don't be afraid to ask or check in with them. Take the pulse. Demonstrate that you care, because that human piece of this is so important in business today. And I do think that's a trend that's only going to grow.
Yeah, and I just want to add real quick as I put my HR hat on, right? For those of you who have HR teams, you're regularly coached on don't talk about anything medical, don't ask these questions. When you start soliciting to figure out what your employees are looking for, the key is not to take any adverse action, right? So in the example that we had earlier, if the individual said, I have depression, and then they subsequently terminated employment, now you have a legal situation on your hands. So when you're just asking if coming from a place of caring and you're trying to figure out what the situation is, it's different, and you kind of have that green light to go ahead and have those conversations. And I think another point to make is, right, we have an attendance policy, right? That's black and white. If you're tardy 16 times in a year, you're terminated, whatever your policy is. But there's also the gray area of noticing a pattern, right? You look at someone's performance, you look at someone's tenure with your organization, and then all of a sudden something has changed. And now you start to see this pattern, then you say, okay, well, let's dig a little deeper, figure out what's going on here. And then you can kind of live in that gray area a little bit. This is not legal advice. Consult your attorney. If you don't have an attorney, stop by the HRACC booth. We have tons of resources that we can provide to you. There's organizations out there where you pay a membership fee, and then you can get legal counseling advice. Because I know that's when we're talking costs, right? Not everyone can afford to have an attorney on staff or to retain an outside counsel.
Well, first of all, thank you very much. It's been a wonderful conversation. Up until March of 2020, we were in an open environment, about 11,000 square feet, and it was easy for me as a CEO to be able to kind of look around, and I knew everybody, and it was very easy to tell if somebody was off. Now, because we're office optional and most people are remote, do you have any tools or things that you think that we should use or could use to be able to keep an eye on our employees now? Because when I say an eye on, from a standpoint of well-being, because I feel like I've lost that.
This is my favorite topic, actually. So I have because I've always managed a remote workforce, because I led a group of 70 people in HR in a 15,000 organization, and most of my HR people were in other states because my employees were across 30 states. And so I would say it's actually just a different type of nuance. When you enter into a virtual class, a virtual room, just like we entered into this room, when we train ourselves to greet people in a different way, it's just a retraining of the brain, so a reframe. So when we're entering into the workplace, into the office, we enter into the office, whether it's at home or at work, we greet our people. And so what I like to do is I literally put it on my calendar every morning, I greet my people. And whether they work in front of me, or I jump on a quick call with them, or I send them a quick IM, I purposefully take action to ensure that I'm checking in with people on a regular basis. So I think what's different now is that there was a nuance to it previously, and now everyone has to do it, and we almost haven't gotten leaders up to speed. Like you're saying, you went from being used to managing in a certain way to not having the skills probably to manage in this hybrid environment. But the reality is there's a lot of leaders like me out there who have been leading this way for a long time. So I think it's seeking mentors and coaches, maybe from larger organizations who have been doing this previously and can offer you some of the ways in which they've done it in the past. One of those ways, like I said, is every day I check in with someone. Just because I started work in my office at home, where I am almost every day, who do I need to check in with today? Who have I not heard from recently? That's one way. 2, daily huddles. Weekly one-on-ones, they don't work for virtual employees. They just don't. I go to a daily or twice weekly or 3 times a week. So instead of one-on-one, 1 hour a week, I'm at 30 minutes twice a week, or I'm at 15 minutes 3 times a week. So it's the same amount of time I'm spending, but I'm really thinking, who is this person? What are they about? What is their role? And then how do I navigate that differently? And it's not one size fits all. By the way, neither is wellness, neither is well-being. It's not one size fits all. So when you're thinking about leading and managing a remote workforce, that's, sorry to monopolize this conversation, but it's a passion of mine, because it's something that I think we've really not done a good job in this country of, is thinking about how to skill up our leaders, our business owners, regardless of size of organization, to be prepared for this. But there's actually a lot of resources out there. Happy to chat after if it would help.
Yeah, I think the key is communication, right? Like you're alluding. Whatever the method is, if it's a WebEx, if it's a Skype, if it's an email, if it's a phone call, making sure you have those lines of communication open and on a regular basis, so that your employees feel comfortable coming to you and letting you know, hey, something's off, or hey, this really resonated with me, really knocked it out of the park. Whatever that feedback's going to be, and then whether it's you or also your leadership team, because it's really got to be a top-down approach, is welcoming that feedback and being open and receptive to it, and then making changes based off of it. Start, stop, continue is great, right? Like if you take 15 minutes, one thing I should start doing, one thing I should stop doing, one thing I should continue doing. And you could really get a lot of good feedback from employees if you just ask them those 3 questions. So anything else you folks would like to add?
I would just add that I love your story, because I think that gives us great hope that this is something that can work. But I think Ron, for your question, when it's a shift for what you're used to and what your staff are used to, it can be tricky, because there are some folks that aren't doing well at home. I mean, I've had some folks tell me, that this has been the biggest staycation ever. And others are struggling with the fact that they're so darn productive that they almost feel like they should be doing more. So I think we need to give ourselves permission, if you will, to take time. And I think you're right, checking in with people. I love the check-in that you're doing. I think that's great. I think we need to continue to have routine meetings. I know throughout the pandemic, we met in our work group at least once a week as a group. And, everyone is kind of tired of Zoom or whatever platform you're using, but come together routinely as a group once a week, if you can. And have other impromptu meetings one-on-one. They don't have to be an hour, check-ins or whatever you need to do just to stay connected to everyone in that group, in the organization. Especially in a small business, it's easier to do. So, try and do that. But also, I go back to my response that you should ask your folks how they're doing. And I have a few people that I've actually said, can you go back to work a day a week? Or can you go back into the office a couple of days? Would that be helpful to you? Because there are some people for whom it's easier. They're more productive at work because they're more focused. They don't have as many distractions. Their office in their home maybe was a bedroom. It's not really conducive to working from home. So it's really helping people figure out how to do it. But I love that it's working so well, and I don't think we're going to go back. If you ask people, that's not what they want. So.
And just one more quick thing that I want to add, and then I think we're going to take one more question, is that the shift from giving permission to giving validation, right? If someone reaches out and says, hey, something, right, we talked earlier about how life happens at work. Hey, my kid is sick, I have to bring them to the doctor. Instead of saying, okay, or, having the expectation that they're going to say, hey, is it okay if I do this? Just say, I hope they get better. I hope they're better soon. Or, do whatever you need to do, right? Giving them that validation so that instead of coming to you and asking for permission to do something, they're going to feel comfortable just reaching out and saying, this is what I need. And they can rely on you that you're going to provide them the flexibility to do what they need to do, and having that open communication from that piece. So we had one more question.
Good morning, and thank you, all four of you, for lending your expertise and I think such a critical energy about holistic health and wellness versus well-being, which is my question. I am a small business owner for 15 years, and part of what I'm beginning to do is to provide holistic health and wellness or well-being into systems. So can you please give a little more insight in terms of the trend, the difference between the two? Because I'm creating a holistic health and wellness or well-being initiative, and I want to make sure I'm speaking the right language.
I can take that if you want to get started, but I was going to say how I would describe it looks like this. I think the move to well-being is whole person support. In my world, we call it biopsychosocial or biological, psychological, social, social support. It's recognizing that there are barriers, often social or psychological, that prevent people from making change in their lives. So when I think about well-being, it's the move toward the idea of identifying and removing barriers that are preventing people from making change in their life. And often those could be in the space of social determinants. They could be, like I said, psychological. I think when we think about wellness, it's single point solution. So the way I would describe that is we have a group of people in our company who have diabetes, and so we've got in this new app, and now they're going to do their diabetes management. Well, a lot of those people could be feeling a lot of stress as a result of having a chronic condition. What are we doing about their stress? That's not in the app, right? So that's, to me, single point wellness, single point solution. There's nothing bad about that. That's often part of an ecosystem. When I think about whole person support, for me, that's well-being and really aligned to what Allyson said earlier. It's the idea of biological, psychological, and social support. That could include financial. It could include anything from caregiving to somebody who needs to lose weight and anything in between. It's identifying and removing barriers that prevent people from making change.
And I would just add to that the objective should be to develop a culture of well-being in your organization. So you want that to just be the culture of where you are, where you're working. That I am supported around whatever my needs are, because everyone's needs are different. Certainly, like, one of the biggest things I hear are parents who talk about childcare, and obviously kids come first. Let's be real. I mean, as business owners, we have to accept that. If your child is sick, and you don't have someone to care for your child, you got to be home with them. I mean, that is really, really challenging. And so having some flexibility, I know, Cesar, you talked about that with your staff, allowing maybe some flex time. Every now and then I'll see somebody who really digs in their heels with an employee who, you know, was supposed to be there from 8 to 5, and they ask if they can shift their schedule. And someone digs in their heels and says no. And, you know, it doesn't impact work in any way, shape, or form. So, you know, making logical, good decisions, having policies that really reflect sort of the culture that you want to project, that sometimes we have to see the human side of what's going on in our business day, and that involves, you know, well-being for all. It's not just, like you said, a platform of one size fits all.
Yeah, one way to encourage that is participate as a business owner. We're all human. You're trying to open the channel of communication, the line of communication. You want to create this holistic approach where everybody's kind of talking together and helping each other out. It's tough to do when the owner's separate in some secret office, comes in, walks right to their office, doesn't say hi to the employees, doesn't share any personal stories, doesn't invite them to personal barbecues or picnics, don't have any social events with the employees. I live by that. I think at the end of the day, we're all human. Whether I'm the owner or they're the employees, it doesn't matter. We're all one unit trying to become successful in our lives. I decided to be a business owner, and they decided to work. It's just, but as a business owner, you want to provide that line of communication. It's open. It's like she says, you want to project forward. Well, we all need help. It's like the airline. When you go on an airplane, they tell you put your mask on first. There's a reason for that. You can't help anyone if you're dead. So at the same time, it's like you want to help people become mentally strong. Show them you're mentally strong. Show them that you're also someone that suffers from mental health. Show them that you're willing to participate in the same panels. I mean, one of the things that some of my companies do, and they have 10, 7 employees, is they have these things. They have little conferences set up once a year, twice a year, and they'll have 4 speakers, one's a life coach, one's a financial advisor, and you as a business owner get to participate and see what populations gearing towards what conversation more than more. And if you notice that they're gearing more towards a life coach, there's kind of what you're looking at. You're basically saying, my employees want to improve their lives. So now let's dig deeper into that, right? So she says it's not just about well-being versus wellness, it's about the entire thing, right? All of us have different problems from financial to health to personal, but as a business owner, you too. So allow yourself, put yourself, become vulnerable if you may. And I think you said, is that a risk we face? No, I think that's what this world needs. I think all of us need to be honest with each other, right? Stop separating yourselves and putting yourselves in a pedestal because we're the owners. We have to project that we know everything, that we're strong. In reality, that's not the truth. The employees that are happy have a strong relationship with owners and CEOs and CFOs. They're almost like a family walking in versus this is a job. This is a career. This is my life. Not a job to me. So I think that's really about the environment that you push forward.
Exactly. All right. And before I say thank you, because I know once I say thank you, everyone stops listening, I've been instructed to inform you that when you leave this room, you should stop by the lunch buffet before making your way back to the grand ballroom for our keynote speaker. Were there any other announcements? I think that was it. We're good. Okay, so first, thank you to our lovely panelists. This has been great. I really appreciate all your participation. And thank you to all of you for coming today, for being here, and for taking your employees' well-being seriously. We really appreciate it. So enjoy the rest of the day and safe travels home. Thank you very much.